Let's be honest, the business world can seem like it has its own secret language, right? It's full of all this legal jargon and acronyms. But what if I told you that you could get fluent in the basics in just a few minutes? We're going to decode the different structures behind every kind of company you can think of.
You've seen it a million times, right? PVT Ltd, or maybe just Ltd, tacked on to the end of a company's name. Well, those aren't just random letters. They're actually a shorthand, a code that tells you a whole story about how that business is set up, who owns it, and maybe most importantly, how much risk those owners are taking. And by the end of this, you'll be able to crack that code in a second.
So here's our game plan. We're going to start with the absolute basics. What even is a company? Then we'll jump into the super important idea of liability. After that, we'll tackle the big one, the difference between private and public companies. Then we'll look at how companies are defined by their size, and we'll finish up by exploring how companies can control each other. Sound good? Let's dive in.
All right, first things first. Before we can start sorting companies into different boxes, we have to know what a company is in the eyes of the law. This is the bedrock for everything else we're going to talk about. Now, I know this definition looks a little dry, but it's actually a huge deal. What this law, Section 220 of the Companies Act, is really saying is that a company is more than just a bunch of people. It's a legal person. It gets its own identity, totally separate from its owners. That means the company itself can own a building, sign contracts, and even go to court, all under its own name. Okay, so if a company is its own legal person, that leads to a really important question. What does that mean for the owners if the company gets into trouble? This is where the concept of liability comes in. You can think of it like a financial firewall between the business and the people who own it. Let's see how strong that firewall can be. So, that firewall we were talking about, it comes in 3 different levels of protection. The most common type by far is limited by shares. This means if you've paid for your shares, your personal assets, your house, your car, are safe. The company's debts are its own problem. Then you have limited by guarantee, which you often see with nonprofits. Here, members promise to chip in a certain amount of money, but only if the company has to shut down. And finally, you've got the unlimited company. This one's pretty rare, and for good reason. There's no firewall. The owners are personally on the hook for all the company's debts.
And that brings us to the biggest difference you see out in the wild, the one that explains PVT Ltd versus Ltd. It all boils down to 2 simple things, where the company gets its money and who is allowed to own a piece of it.
A private company, that's your PVT-LT, is all about its rules and restrictions. First, you can't just sell your shares to anybody you want. There are rules about transfers. Second, it keeps the ownership circle tight with a maximum of 200 members. And third, this is the big one, it can't go out to the general public and ask for investment money. The whole point is to keep control within a small private group.
So what's a public company? The legal definition is almost funny in its simplicity. It's any company that isn't a private company. But what that really means is it's free from those 3 big restrictions we just mentioned. And that freedom opens up a whole new universe for raising money and growing.
Let's put them side by side. A private company, limited members, restricted share sales. It's all about control. A public company, no limit on members, and anyone can buy or sell its shares. It's all about access to public money. So it's really a classic trade-off. Do you want tight control, or do you want easier access to cash for growth?
Now, besides that whole private versus public thing, the law also gets that not all businesses are giant corporations. So it creates some special categories just for smaller businesses, which can give them a leg up with fewer rules to follow.
1. Just a single person. But that single person can now have all the power of a full-fledged company.
And this is how they do it. A one-person company, or an OPC, is a total game changer for solo entrepreneurs. It lets one person form a company that has its own legal identity and, here's the key, limited liability. This means a single business owner can go after their dream without risking their personal savings if the business fails. It's a pretty big deal. All right, next up we have the small company. This isn't just a description, it's an official legal status. If a private company is small enough to fit within certain financial limits, it gets this label. And being a small company is great because it means less paperwork and fewer regulations to worry about. So what are those limits? Here are the magic numbers. First, it has to be a private company. Its paid-up share capital, that's the actual money shareholders have paid for their stock, can't be more than 4 crore rupees. Then, its turnover, the total money from sales, has to be 40 crore rupees or less. And one last thing. It can't be part of a larger corporate family. It has to be independent to get these benefits.
Okay, for our last section, let's zoom in on how companies are defined by who owns them and how they're connected to each other. This is all about figuring out who's really calling the shots. 51%. Remember this number. In the world of business, it's the tipping point. Once you own more than half, you have the majority. You have the control. And this is especially important when the government gets involved. So, a government company is any company where the government, either central or state, owns at least 51% of the shares. That controlling stake means the government is in the driver's seat. It gets to guide the company's decisions and direction.
This whole idea of control also defines relationships between companies themselves. The absolute easiest way to picture this is to think of a family tree, but for corporations. You've got a parent company at the top.
And that parent is what we call a holding company. Its whole purpose is to own and control other companies. It sits at the top of the org chart, managing its family of businesses.
And the children in this family are the subsidiary companies. Now, a company becomes a subsidiary in one of two main ways. Either the holding company has the power to hire and fire most of its directors, or, just like with a government company, it owns more than half of the shares. Either way, the holding company is in control.
So let's bring it all home. Why should you care about any of this? Because every single one of these labels has a real-world impact. Liability? That determines how much personal financial risk an owner takes. Private versus public? That shapes a company's entire future and how big it can get. Size? That can mean less red tape and an easier life for a small business owner. And control? Well, that tells you who's really in charge.
And there you have it, the fundamental blueprints for how businesses are built. From a one-person company perfect for a solo flight to a massive public company that can raise money from millions, each structure is a different tool for a different job. So that leaves just one question for you. If you were launching your next big idea tomorrow, which one of these structures would you choose to build it on? Something to think about. Thanks for tuning in.